Our relationship with Allah is often dictated by our perception of Allah. In other words, if we constantly choose to view God as distant and punitive, that is how He will appear in our lives. But God is not such. Ever wonder why, despite your best efforts, you don't feel that overwhelming love of Allah that you seek? What's standing in the way? Consider the case of Jamal. He practices his faith diligently, but feels often that he's going through the motions and doesn't necessarily know what is between him and that experience of loving Allah and feeling God's love for him. There are many reasons why Jamal may not experience God's love, despite the fact that that love is ever present, as God promises. One of those reasons is potentially how he views himself. There may be feelings of shame and personal unworthiness that mask his capacity to experience God's love. At times, it could be the experiences that we have with others, bad experiences with others in particular, at times get projected upon our understanding of God's love. One of the most common reasons why we don't feel God's love actually stems from misunderstandings about God Himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم. O human being, what has deceived you concerning your Lord, the generous? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse reminds us that we may deceive ourselves about God and describe Him in ways He does not describe Himself, and think of Him in ways that He does not want us to think of Him. In a famous hadith Qudsi, where God is speaking, He says, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي. I am according to the opinion of my servant. What does this mean? Our relationship with Allah is often dictated by our perception of Allah. In other words, if we constantly choose to view God as distant and punitive, that is how He will appear in our lives. But God is not such. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Himself in the Quran as the most merciful, the forgiver, the pardoner. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has the attribute of anger. But often what happens is that if we experience a particular harshness from an authority figure, we think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attribute of anger manifests in the same way that this harsh authority figure manifests. This is yet again a projecting of human qualities upon Allah, and assuming that Allah operates in the same way that a human operates in the conditional, transactional format that we do. So let's take anger, for example. It is crucial to understand that Allah's anger is not like human anger. Allah's anger is rooted in His attribute of justice. And so where our anger may be punitive and reactionary, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's anger is purely rooted in His justice and informed by complete infinite knowledge. In addition to that, it is also informed by the other attributes we cannot forget, such as His love, His mercy, and forgiveness, which encompasses all things and is also manifested in a manner that no human can even comprehend. Even the way that we forgive as human beings is often conditional. Someone may harm us and we may forgive them but never talk to them again. Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness the same way? Absolutely not. Remember, we are what we choose to focus on. Let's go back to Jamal. Imagine if Jamal approached prayer, thinking about God's waiting embrace for him. Imagine when Jamal made tawbah, his first thought was how pleased Allah was in turning back. As opposed to thinking, will my tawbah be accepted? As opposed to thinking that when I come into prayer, it won't mean anything. What if Jamal chose to see every single act of worship as a step towards experiencing God's love and mercy that is ever present? Remember, Allah is not your parent. He's not Thanos in the movies of your internal dialogue. Allah is beyond human limitations and human attributes. And when we seek to understand God, we cannot limit how God describes himself with the frailty and limitations of human attributes and realities. Let our relationship with Allah reflect the full spectrum of his attributes, not limited by our human conditions and limitations. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave us a very beautiful example to illustrate this. He told us about a woman frantically searching for her child after a battle. She finally spots him and embraces him with intensity. The Prophet ﷺ told the companions, look to this mother. Would she ever throw her child into a fire? The companions immediately said, no. Why would she and how could she ever do this? A mother would never do such a thing. The Prophet ﷺ then says, God is far more merciful to his servants than this mother to her child. We may have reference points to some of God's attributes like mercy in our lived experience in this life. But even that can never be projected as a limitation upon God, because the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that even God's mercy far outweighs anything we can comprehend. Even the mercy between a child and her mother, which is, the Prophet ﷺ gives this example because it is arguably the ultimate archetype. My dear beloved brother and sister, change your perception of Allah and you will change your relationship with Allah. God is not judged by human understandings, limitations, expectations. So, in the context of Jamal, next time he goes into the prayer, what should he be thinking about? He should be thinking about God's waiting to embrace him with his love and mercy and is fulfilling that obligation. Next time Jamal makes a mistake, he's going to be thinking, not that Allah is going to conclusively punish me and never forgive me, but rather, he's going to think, Allah is not pleased with what I did, but he is waiting to embrace me with his love when I turn back to him.